When Aaliyah Morrison's grandfather died, the family descended like vultures. They wanted the house in Harlem. They wanted the vintage car collection. They wanted the bank accounts and the jewelry and every piece of furniture worth selling. But Aaliyah, she asked for one thing: the battered old Steinway piano that had sat silent in her grandfather's basement for 30 years. The keys stuck. The wood was scratched and faded. Half the strings were broken. Her cousin laughed in her face. Her aunt called her foolish. Her uncle said she was throwing away her inheritance for junk. They had no idea what that piano was hiding, and what Aaliyah would discover inside would not only make her a millionaire, it would rewrite jazz history forever. Aaliyah Morrison was 32 years old, a music teacher in Brooklyn, living paycheck to paycheck in a small apartment she could barely afford. She taught piano to children after school, watched her students struggle with scales and timing, and wondered sometimes if she'd made the right choice pursuing music instead of something more practical. Her grandfather, William Morrison, though everyone in Harlem called him Duke, had been a jazz pianist. Not famous, not like the legends whose names everyone knew, but respected. A session musician, a sideman, someone other musicians trusted. He'd died at 87, and the family gathered at his Harlem brownstone like it was Black Friday at a department store. Aaliyah's uncle Jerome was already measuring the living room for his own furniture. Her Aunt Patricia was photographing the jewelry. Her cousins were arguing about who got the car. When the lawyer read the will, everything was to be divided equally among the grandchildren. Cash property possessions. Split it all fair and square, Duke had written. So what do you want, Aaliyah? Her uncle Jerome had asked, pen poised over his inventory list. The silverware. Some of the furniture Aaliyah had walked down to the basement, where dust motes floated in the afternoon light streaming through a grimy window. And there it was, the Steinway. Ebony black, or it had been once. Now it was scratched, faded to gray in places. She pressed a key. It stuck. Pressed another. No sound. I want the piano, she'd said. The room went silent. Then her cousin Marcus laughed. That old thing, Aaliyah? It doesn't even work. The soundboard's probably cracked. It's not worth the cost of moving it. I don't care, Aaliyah said quietly. I want it. Her Aunt Patricia shook her head. Honey, be smart. Take something valuable. Take the dining room set. Take some of the jewelry. Don't waste your share on broken junk. But Aaliyah insisted. Something about that piano called to her. She remembered her grandfather sitting at it when she was small, his hands moving over keys that actually played back then, showing her how to find middle C, how to curve her fingers just right. She remembered him saying more than once, "This piano knows more than music, little bird." She'd thought he was being poetic. Now she wondered if he'd meant something else. The family thought she was crazy. They said so loudly and often as the movers carefully maneuvered the piano up from Duke's basement across his small yard and into the truck. You're throwing away thousands of dollars, Jerome said, shaking his head. That piano's worth maybe $200 for parts. Maybe. But Aaliyah had made up her mind. She'd liquidated her small portion of the cash inheritance to pay for the moving company, the storage fees, everything needed to get this piano into her tiny Brooklyn apartment. Her roommate took one look at the massive instrument dominating their living room and said, "You're insane. You know that, right?" Maybe she was. But when Aaliyah looked at that piano, she didn't see broken keys and scratched wood. She saw her grandfather. She saw being 7 years old, sitting next to Duke on the bench, his patient voice guiding her through Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. She saw being 12, angry at her parents running to Grandpa Duke's house, and him sitting her down at this very piano. "Play it out," he'd said. "Whatever you're feeling, play it out. The piano doesn't judge." She saw being 17 having just gotten rejected from Juilliard, crying so hard she could barely see the keys. Duke had sat beside her and played something so beautiful, so mournful, and yet hopeful that she'd stopped crying just to listen. What was that, she'd whispered. Something I wrote a long time ago, he'd said. For someone who needed to remember that rejection isn't the end of the story. It's just a chapter. Why didn't you ever record it, she'd asked. Why didn't you become famous? Duke had smiled, sad and distant. Fame isn't everything, little bird. Sometimes keeping something safe is more important than sharing it with the world. She hadn't understood then. She was starting to wonder if she was about to. The piano sat in her living room for 3 days before she finally tried to play it. She pressed middle C. Stuck. She tried F. Stuck. She worked her way across the keyboard. Half the keys didn't work at all. The other half produced sounds so out of tune, so discordant it hurt to hear. Her roommate winced from the kitchen. Maybe your family was right. Maybe Aaliyah admitted. But something nagged at her. She pressed down on the keys harder, felt the resistance. It wasn't the normal stiffness of old, unmaintained keys. It was like something was blocking them from the inside. She grabbed her phone and started searching. Piano repair. Piano tuning. Brooklyn. Harlem. Vintage Steinway. She found a name, Robert Chen, 4th-generation piano tuner, specialized in vintage instruments. His reviews called him meticulous and honest and expensive, but worth every penny. She booked an appointment for the following Saturday. When Robert arrived, he was a small man in his 60s, carrying a worn leather case of tools. He walked around the piano, slowly running his hands over the wood-pressing keys, listening. Steinway Model M, he said finally. 1947. This was a beautiful instrument once. Can you fix it? Aaliyah asked. Let me look inside first. He opened the top, peered down into the interior. Aaliyah watched his face change. Confusion. Then surprise. Then something like shock. Ms. Morrison, he said slowly. I need to ask you something. Has anyone else worked on this piano recently? Not that I know of. It belonged to my grandfather. It's been in his basement for 30 years. 30 years, Robert repeated. He looked back into the piano. Ms. Morrison, these keys aren't broken. They're blocked. Blocked. Something's been installed inside, under the hammers, deliberately. He looked at her, his expression careful. I think your grandfather didn't want anyone to play this piano. Aaliyah's heart started beating faster. Can you see what's blocking them? I'd need to remove the action. The hammers, the strings, everything. It's a delicate process. But yes, I can do it. He paused. It'll take several hours. And I have to tell you, Ms. Morrison, in 40 years of working on pianos, I've never seen anything like this. Whatever your grandfather hid in here, he went to enormous trouble to hide it well. Robert came back the following weekend with an assistant and what looked like a full surgical suite of tools. Aaliyah's roommate had tactfully gone to stay with her boyfriend for the weekend. I don't want to be there when you find out it's full of dead rats or something, she'd said. But Aaliyah didn't think it was rats. She sat on the couch, laptop open, but ignored watching Robert and his assistant carefully, methodically dismantle the piano's internal mechanisms. They removed the fallboard, the keyframe, the action stack. Each piece was laid out carefully on white sheets spread across the floor. Beautiful craftsmanship, Robert murmured, examining a hammer. Your grandfather knew what he was doing. These modifications are precise. Professional. My grandfather was a jazz pianist, Aaliyah said. He played, but I didn't know he could do this kind of technical work. Someone taught him well. Robert peered into the now exposed interior of the piano. Ms. Morrison, you should see this. Aaliyah moved to stand beside him. Inside the piano's body, where the soundboard should have been clearly visible, was a false panel. custom-fitted stained to match the original wood. If you didn't know what you were looking for, you'd never notice it. "Can you open it?" Aaliyah's voice came out as a whisper. "I can try." It took another hour. The panel was secured with hidden latches, a simple but effective mechanism. When it finally came free, Robert lifted it carefully out. Beneath it was a space perhaps 6 inches deep, running nearly the full length of the piano's interior. And inside that space were objects wrapped in oilcloth, preserved with desiccant packets, protected from moisture and time. Aaliyah reached in with trembling hands. The first bundle was light flat. She carried it to the coffee table, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. "Take your time," Robert said gently. "Whatever this is, it's waited 30 years. It can wait another few minutes." But Aaliyah couldn't wait. She carefully unwrapped the oilcloth. Inside was a stack of papers. Not just papers, letters. Dozens of them written in careful cursive on letterhead from the 1950s and 60s. Blue Note records, Atlantic records, Prestige, Columbia. She picked up the first letter dated April 15th, 1952. "Dear Duke, thank you for the session yesterday. That solo on Midnight Blue was perfection. Thelonious said you made him sound better, and coming from Monk, that's high praise indeed. You're always welcome in my studio. Best regards, Alfred Lyon." Blue Note. Records. Aaliyah's hands went numb. Alfred Lyon, Thelonious Monk. Her grandfather had played with Thelonious Monk. She shuffled through more letters. A thank you note from Billie Holiday, a postcard from Dizzy Gillespie, a letter from Duke Ellington himself, Duke, to Duke, thanking her grandfather for sitting in when Charlie couldn't make it. "Oh my God," Aaliyah breathed. "Oh my God." Robert watched her, his expression understanding. "Your grandfather was more than just a sideman, wasn't he?" "I didn't know," Aaliyah said. "He never talked about this. Never. I knew he played jazz, but I thought he was just, I don't know. Local clubs, small venues. Not this. Not with these people." She kept unwrapping bundles, photographs next. Black and white, slightly faded, but carefully preserved. Her grandfather, so young, maybe 25, standing with his arm around a laughing Billie Holiday. Duke at a piano, in what the caption on the back identified as Minton's Playhouse, 1947. Duke with Charlie Parker, both of them grinning at the camera. Duke with Miles Davis, with John Coltrane, with people whose names Aaliyah had studied in music history, whose recordings she'd learned from, whose genius had shaped the entire landscape of American music. "Robert," she said slowly, "how much more is in there?" Robert looked into the piano's hidden compartment. "A lot more, Ms. Morrison. This is just the top layer. Aaliyah called in sick to work on Monday. She couldn't teach. She couldn't focus on anything except the contents of her grandfather's piano. She spread everything out across her apartment floor. Letters organized by date, photographs organized by venue and year. And as she read, as she studied a picture, began to emerge of a man she'd never really known. William Duke Morrison hadn't just been a session musician. He'd been one of the most sought-after pianists in New York during the golden age of jazz. He'd played on albums that Aaliyah owned, that she'd listened to 100 times, never knowing her grandfather's hands had touched those keys. He'd been there for Billie Holiday's final recording sessions. He'd been part of Charlie Parker's legendary jam sessions at Birdland. He'd filled in for Bud Powell at the Blue Note. He'd been trusted, respected, called upon, when the best of the best needed someone reliable. But more than that, he'd been a confidant. The letters made that clear. Musicians wrote to him about struggles, about money, Troubles about record companies cheating them about the weight of fame and the cost of genius. Dear Duke Billie Holiday had written in 1958, "You're one of the few people who understands. The music is everything, and it's killing me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being someone I can trust." The letters painted a picture of exploitation and injustice. Record labels signing black musicians to contracts that stole their royalties. Producers taking credit for arrangements the musicians themselves had created. A system that fed on black genius and gave back poverty and broken promises. And through it all, her grandfather had been there. Steady, trustworthy, a keeper of secrets. Aaliyah found a letter from 1963 from Duke Ellington, Duke. "I'm trusting you with the arrangements we discussed. Keep them safe. Don't let anyone know you have them. When the time is right, they'll prove what we've been saying all along. You're the only one I trust with this. Your friend always, Edward Arrangements." What arrangements? Aaliyah went back to the piano. Robert had left the hidden compartment accessible, the false panel propped against the wall. She reached in deeper feeling around in the space. Her fingers touched something hard. Flat. She pulled it out. A leather portfolio about 2 feet by 3 feet, carefully wrapped in more oilcloth. When she opened it, her breath caught. Sheet music. Original sheet music. Handwritten. She recognized Duke Ellington's signature at the bottom of the first page. The title, Black, Brown, and Beige, Original Arrangement. She'd studied this piece in college. Duke Ellington's masterwork, a jazz symphony celebrating African American history. But this wasn't the version that had been recorded. This was different, more complex, more ambitious. Notes in the margin in Ellington's handwriting. As intended, before the cuts. Aaliyah's hands shook as she leafed through the portfolio. More original arrangements, more handwritten scores. Thelonious Monk's handwriting, angular and precise. Billie Holiday's lyrics written in her own hand for songs Aaliyah had never heard of. And tucked into the back of the portfolio, a small notebook. Her grandfather's handwriting. She opened it to the first page, 1963. "They're trying to erase us. Trying to rewrite what we created. The record companies want to own not just our music, but our history. They're changing arrangements, claiming authorship-cutting deals that leave the musicians with nothing. Charlie's gone. Billie's dying. Monk is struggling. Duke is exhausted from fighting. They've asked me to keep things safe. Documents, original scores, proof of who created what. I'm building a vault. The only place I trust. The only place they'll never think to look." Inside the piano. Inside the music itself. Aaliyah read through the notebook. Page after page of her grandfather's careful documentation. Lists of what he'd been given. Who had given it to him. Why they'd trusted him. "Billie gave me her lyrics today. She's scared they'll be lost or stolen after she's gone. Keep them safe." "Duke," she said, "until someone who'll treat them right can have them." Miles brought the Prestige recordings, the original tapes from the sessions. He says the label's already trying to remix and re-release them, cutting him out of the profits. "They're evidence," he said, "evidence of theft." The last entry was dated January 1964. "It's done. Everything is secure. The piano holds it all now. I've modified the action so no one can play it, so no one will think to look inside. To the world, it's just a broken instrument. To me, it's a vault holding the most precious thing in the world, truth. I'll keep this secret until the time is right, until the world is ready to hear these stories properly, until black musicians are credited, compensated, respected, however long that takes." Aaliyah closed the notebook, tears streaming down her face. Her grandfather hadn't been a failed musician or a has-been. He'd been a guardian. He'd sacrificed his own career to protect the legacy of others. And he'd hidden it all in plain sight inside the one thing that symbolized everything they'd created, the music itself. Aaliyah spent the next week in a daze. She went to work but barely remembered teaching. She came home and sat with the letters, the photographs, the sheet music. She felt like an archaeologist who'd stumbled into a lost tomb. But something nagged at her. The compartment had been deep, but not that deep. The portfolio, the letters, the photographs, they'd only filled maybe half the space. And her grandfather's notebook had mentioned everything. What else was there? On Saturday, she called Robert again. "I need you to come back. I think there's more." When he arrived, she showed him the compartment again. Could there be another false bottom? Another layer? Robert examined the space carefully. He measured the piano's external dimensions, then measured the internal space. He frowned. "You're right. There's about 4 inches unaccounted for, between the bottom of this compartment and the actual bottom of the piano case." He looked at her. "Your grandfather really did build a vault. It took them 3 hours to find the mechanism. It wasn't a latch this time, but a combination lock hidden under a panel that looked like part of the piano's structural support. The combination was written on the last page of her grandfather's notebook, disguised as a phone number. When the lock clicked open, Aaliyah held her breath. Robert lifted away the panel. Beneath it was a custom-built metal container sealed against moisture and time. Inside that container were things that made the first discovery look like a warm-up act. Shellac recording discs carefully packed in protective sleeves. Aaliyah recognized the format 78 RPM records from the 1940s and 50s. But these weren't mass-produced recordings. These were acetate discs, one-of-a-kind recordings made during jam sessions and experimental studio work. The kind of recordings that were never meant to be released, that captured musicians at their most creative and uninhibited. She lifted one carefully. The label was handwritten. Charlie Parker Birdland, August 12, 1952. Live. Only copy. Another disc. Billie Holiday Private Session, April 1959. Final recordings. Another Miles Davis and John Coltrane Experimental, December 1955. Modal improvisation. Aaliyah's vision blurred. These weren't just rare. These were recordings that scholars thought were lost forever. Recordings that jazz historians would sell their souls to hear. But there was more. Beneath the recording discs were reel-to-reel tapes. Professional quality magnetic tape from the 1960s. She read the labels Coltrane, A Love Supreme Alternate Takes Monk, Complete Riverside Sessions Unedited, Mingus, Civil Rights Suite Full Orchestration, and beneath the tapes wrapped in acid-free paper were vinyl records. Not commercial releases, test pressings. First pressings signed by the artists. Albums that had never been released. "Ms. Morrison," Robert said quietly. "Do you understand what you have here?" Aaliyah couldn't speak. She could only nod. "This is history," Robert continued. "This isn't just valuable. This is priceless. This is the kind of discovery that happens once in a lifetime, maybe once in a century." Aaliyah found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "What do I do?" "You call an expert," Robert said. "Someone who specializes in jazz history and archival preservation. Because what your grandfather did..." He shook his head in wonder. He didn't just keep these things safe. He created one of the most important jazz archives in existence, and he hid it inside a piano, Dr. Marcus Williams arrived on Tuesday morning with an entire team from the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Word had spread quickly through the tight-knit community of jazz historians. Aaliyah had made one phone call to a professor she'd studied under at NYU. That professor had made one call to the Smithsonian. And now her small Brooklyn apartment was filled with experts in white gloves carrying archival equipment and looking like Christmas had come early. Dr. Williams was a tall man in his 50s with gray dreadlocks and the kind of careful excitement that comes from decades of disappointment followed by sudden, impossible hope. "Ms. Morrison," he said, shaking her hand. "I've spent my entire career studying this era of jazz history. If what you've described is authentic, this is the most significant discovery in my field in 50 years. It's authentic," Aaliyah said. She'd already accepted that her life had changed forever. They worked methodically. Each item was photographed, catalogued, examined. Dr. Williams's team included a musicologist, an audio restoration specialist, an archivist, and an appraiser from Christie's auction house who specialized in music memorabilia. The letters were examined first. Authentic, the archivist confirmed after examining paper ink and handwriting samples. These are genuine correspondences from the 1950s and 60s. The photographs were authenticated next. Cross-referenced with known images from the era, examined for signs of forgery, confirmed genuine. But it was the recordings that caused the real excitement. The audio specialist set up equipment to play one of the acetate discs. He chose the Charlie Parker recording dated August 12, 1952. He placed it on a vintage turntable designed for 78 RPM playback, lowered the needle with infinite care. The room fell silent. And then through the speakers came the sound of a saxophone. Not just any saxophone. Bird. Charlie Parker, playing with a freedom and joy that made Aaliyah's skin break out in goosebumps. The recording quality was raw, live, unpolished. You could hear the crowd in the background at Birdland. You could hear other musicians laughing, calling out encouragement. You could hear the pure, unfiltered genius of one of the greatest musicians who ever lived, captured in a moment that no one except the people in that room had heard in 70 years. When the song ended, there was absolute silence. Then Dr. Williams let out a breath. "My God," he whispered. "It's real. It's all real. They worked for 3 days straight. Aaliyah called in sick to work. She didn't sleep. She couldn't. She watched as experts carefully documented every single item her grandfather had preserved. The discoveries kept mounting Duke Ellington's original arrangement for black, brown, and beige before the record company forced cuts. The appraiser's hand shook as he examined it. "This is like finding the original manuscript of a Beethoven symphony," he said. I can't even estimate the value. Billie Holiday's handwritten lyrics for 3 unknown songs written in the last year of her life." The musicologist wept reading them. "These are gorgeous," she said. "These are absolutely gorgeous. Why were these never recorded?" "Because she died 2 months later," Dr. Williams said softly, checking dates in his database. "She died before she could get back into the studio. A reel-to-reel tape labeled A Love Supreme, complete session unedited. John Coltrane's masterpiece, but this was more than what had been released. This included the conversations between takes, the false starts, Coltrane explaining his vision to the other musicians. It's like having a window into his creative process, the audio specialist said reverently. Original test pressings of albums that had been suppressed, never commercially released. Albums that told stories record labels hadn't wanted told in the 1960s. Civil rights anthems, political protest music. Art that had been deemed too controversial. Your grandfather was protecting more than just music, Dr. Williams said. He was protecting truth. He was preserving the authentic voice of black musicians in an era when that voice was being filtered, controlled, and silenced by white record executives. And then they found the Thelonious Monk compositions. 3 complete pieces fully orchestrated that had never been performed or recorded. Monk's handwriting filled the pages with his unique musical language, complex rhythms, and harmonies that scholars had thought were lost to time. These alone could change how we understand Monk's evolution as a composer, the musicologist said. These fill in gaps in his development that we've been guessing at for decades. By the 3rd day, the Christie's appraiser had filled an entire notebook with estimates. On Wednesday evening, he sat down with Aaliyah at her small kitchen table. "Ms. Morrison," he said, "I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you is a preliminary estimate. A full authentication and appraisal process would take months. But based on comparable sales of similar items, based on the historical significance, based on rarity and condition," he paused, as if gathering courage. "The total value of this collection is approximately $95 million. Aaliyah's apartment went silent. Even the other experts who'd been carefully packing items into archival boxes stopped to stare. $95 million, Aaliyah repeated numbly. "Possibly more." The appraiser continued. "That's a conservative estimate. At auction, if multiple institutions compete for these items, the price could go significantly higher. The Duke Ellington arrangement alone could fetch $20 million. The Charlie Parker recordings, possibly $15 million. The Coltrane tapes, another $15 million. The Monk compositions, at least $10 million. The Billie Holiday materials, $10 million. The other recordings, documents, photographs, and ephemera, $25 million. He looked at her seriously. "Ms. Morrison, you're not just wealthy. You're the owner of one of the most culturally significant private collections in American history." The news broke on Thursday morning. Someone Aaliyah never found out who had leaked the story to the New York Times. By noon, her phone was ringing non-stop. Reporters, agents, lawyers, museum curators, record labels, television producers wanting to make documentaries. Aaliyah turned off her phone and let Dr. Williams handle the press. He organized a press conference at the museum for Friday afternoon. The room was packed. Every major news outlet, NPR, the BBC, Jazz Radio, Billboard, Rolling Stone, academics from universities across the country, representatives from the Smithsonian, the Library of Congress, the National Endowment for the Arts. Dr. Williams stood at the podium with Aaliyah beside him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "what we're about to share with you will change the way we understand American musical history." He proceeded to outline the discovery. The hidden compartments in Duke Morrison's piano, the letters, the photographs, the recordings, the original compositions, the careful documentation that Duke had maintained of everything entrusted to his care. William Duke Morrison, Dr. Williams said, was not just a talented musician. He was a historian, an archivist, and a protector of cultural heritage. In an era when black musicians were being systematically exploited and erased, he took it upon himself to preserve the truth, the authentic voices, the original works, the evidence of who created what. He played a clip from one of the Charlie Parker recordings. The room sat in stunned silence, listening to music that hadn't been heard in 70 years. "This is not just valuable," Dr. Williams continued. "This is sacred. This is the sound of American genius preserved against all odds by a man who understood that some things matter more than fame or fortune." Then he invited other experts to speak. The musicologist talked about the significance of the original compositions. The archivist discussed the historical value of the correspondence. The audio specialist explained the rarity and importance of the live recordings. Finally, the Christie's appraiser stood up. "I've been asked to confirm the estimated value of this collection. After 3 days of examination by multiple experts after consulting with colleagues at Sotheby's at Heritage Auctions and at specialized music memorabilia firms around the world, I can confirm that the Morrison collection, as we're calling it, has an estimated value of at least $95 million, possibly significantly more at auction." The room erupted. Questions shouted from every direction, cameras flashing. The noise was overwhelming. Dr. Williams raised his hands for quiet. "Ms. Morrison would like to say a few words." Aaliyah stepped to the microphone. Her hands were shaking, but she'd prepared what she wanted to say. "My grandfather died believing the world had forgotten him. He died thinking he was just an old musician who'd never made it big. He didn't know that what he'd done protecting these treasures, preserving this history, was more important than fame ever could have been." Her voice cracked, but she continued. "He used to tell me that true value isn't always visible, that sometimes the most important things are the things people overlook. I thought he was talking about music, about art, but he was talking about something bigger. He was talking about truth, about justice, about making sure that the people who created beauty weren't erased by the people who profited from it." She looked out at the sea of faces. "I'm still figuring out what to do with all of this. But I know one thing. My grandfather kept these things safe for a reason. He was waiting for a time when they could be shared properly, when the musicians could get the credit they deserved, when the truth could be told without being filtered or controlled." She took a breath. "I think that time is now." The room exploded with applause. After the press conference, Aaliyah went back to her apartment, exhausted and overwhelmed. The media circus continued outside, news vans parked on her street, reporters calling her neighbors for interviews. But inside, in the quiet of her living room, she sat down with the one thing she hadn't shown the experts yet: her grandfather's personal journal. She'd found it at the very bottom of the hidden compartment, wrapped separately from everything else. While the other documents were about the collection, about the musicians, about the preservation work, this was personal. This was Duke's story, in his own words. She opened it to the first page, dated January 1947. "I'm 22 years old, and I just played with Charlie Parker." Charlie Parker. I keep saying it to myself because I can't believe it. He asked me to sit in at Minton's, said he'd heard I could play. We did anthropology, and when we finished, he nodded at me. Just nodded, like I'd passed some test. I thought that was it. I thought that was the moment my life would change. I'd get discovered, get famous, make records. That was 20 years ago. I'm writing this in 1967, and I'm still a sideman. Still reliable old Duke. The guy who shows up on time, plays the right notes, doesn't cause trouble. But you know what? I've played with everyone who matters. I've been in the room when history was being made. I've been trusted by the best musicians in the world. Maybe that's enough." Aaliyah turned pages, reading her grandfather's account of the golden age of jazz. His observations about the musicians he worked with. His growing awareness of the exploitation happening around him. An entry from 1958. "Billie came to me crying today. The record company cut her royalties again. Said she wasn't selling enough records. But I've seen the numbers. I know how much they're making off her recordings. They're stealing from her, plain and simple. Stealing from all of us. She asked me if I'd keep some things safe for her. Her lyrics. Personal recordings. Things she doesn't want the label to get their hands on. I said yes. What else could I say? She's Billie Holiday. She's a goddamn legend, and they're treating her like she's disposable. I'm thinking I need a better hiding place than my closet." An entry from 1963. "Charlie's dead. Bird is gone. He was 44 years old, and they killed him. Not with a gun. With exploitation, with addiction, they fed and profited from, with a system that used him up and threw him away. Duke Ellington came to see me today. He's scared. He says the record companies are trying to control everything. Change arrangements take credit-cut musicians out of profits. He gave me his original scores for Black, Brown, and Beige, the full version before they made him cut it down. Keep it safe, he said. Someday someone will want to know the truth. I'm building a vault. I'm going to use the piano. The Steinway my father gave me, the one I've played since I was 16. I'll hide everything inside it. The last place they'd look. Inside the music itself. Aaliyah read about her grandfather's careful modifications to the piano, his documentation of everything he received, his growing sense of purpose. An entry from 1965. Miles gave me the tapes today. Original recordings the label's trying to bury because they're too experimental. Too black, he said bitterly. They want jazz, but not too much jazz. They want black music, but not too black. I told him I'd keep them safe. I told him that someday people would hear these recordings and understand what he was trying to do. I hope I'm right. But it was an entry from 1972 that made Aaliyah start crying. I saw my granddaughter today. Little Aaliyah. She's 5 years old and she wanted to play the piano. I had to tell her the piano was broken, couldn't be played. She looked so disappointed. I wanted to tell her the truth. I wanted to explain that the piano holds something more important than music. That it's protecting the legacy of the greatest musicians who ever lived. That sometimes you have to sacrifice what you love for something bigger. But she's 5. She wouldn't understand. Maybe someday she will. I'm teaching her on a different piano. My neighbor's upright. It's not the same. But I show her the Steinway sometimes. I tell her, this piano knows more than music, little bird. Someday maybe she'll figure out what I mean. The last entry was dated March 2024, just 2 months before her grandfather died. I'm 87 years old. I'm tired. My hands shake too much to play anymore. The world has changed in ways I never imagined. Black musicians are finally getting some of the credit they deserve. Not enough, but more than when I was young. I think about what's hidden in the piano. All those voices silent for so long. All that history waiting. I don't know who'll get the piano when I die. The family thinks it's worthless. Maybe that's good. Maybe whoever takes it will be someone who sees past the surface. Someone who looks deeper. I hope they understand. I hope they realize I wasn't a failure. I wasn't a has-been. I was a guardian. I kept the music safe when no one else could. That's enough for one lifetime. Aaliyah closed the journal, tears streaming down her face. She looked at the piano, still partially disassembled in her living room, its secrets finally revealed. I understand, Grandpa, she whispered. I understand now. Her grandfather hadn't given up his career. He'd chosen a different kind of success. Not fame, but purpose. Not recognition, but integrity. He'd seen what was happening to the musicians he respected, the exploitation, the erasure, the theft of credit and compensation, and he'd decided to do something about it. He'd become a keeper of truth, a protector of legacy. A man who understood that sometimes the most important work happens in silence, in secret, preserved against the day when the world is finally ready to listen. The week after the press conference, Aaliyah's family started calling. Her uncle Jerome was first. Aaliyah, honey, we need to talk about the collection. As a family, we should all benefit from this, right? We're all Duke's grandchildren. Aaliyah listened to his pitch, his justifications, his careful reminders that family should stick together. When he finished, she said simply, Uncle Jerome, you told me the piano was worthless junk. You literally laughed in my face. Well, yes, but we didn't know exactly. You didn't know, because you didn't look, you didn't care. You wanted what looked valuable, and you dismissed what didn't. She took a breath. The collection is mine. Legally. Morally. Grandpa left it to me because he knew I'd do the right thing with it. And what is the right thing, Aaliyah? Keeping it all for yourself, no, she said. But not giving it to people who only care now that it's worth money. She hung up. Her Aunt Patricia called next. Then her cousin Marcus. Then relatives she hadn't heard from in years. They all had the same message delivered in different ways. We're family. Share the wealth. Don't be selfish. But Aaliyah had been thinking. She'd been talking to Dr. Williams, to lawyers, to ethics advisors. She'd been reading her grandfather's journal over and over, trying to understand what he would have wanted. 2 weeks after the discovery, she held a private meeting at the museum with Dr. Williams and representatives from several major institutions. "I've made some decisions," she announced. First, the majority of the collection will be donated to public institutions: the Smithsonian, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Library of Congress. These items belong to history. They belong to everyone. They should be accessible for research, for education, for inspiration. Dr. Williams nodded approvingly. "A generous and appropriate decision, Ms. Morrison." Second, Aaliyah continued, a portion of the collection will be sold at auction. Not all of it, but enough. The proceeds will be used to establish the William Duke Morrison Foundation. The foundation will provide scholarships for young musicians, particularly students of color who want to study jazz. It will fund preservation of other at-risk musical archives. It will support fair compensation and credit for musicians whose work has been exploited. The room was silent, listening. Third, I'm keeping certain items. Personal letters written to my grandfather, his journal, some photographs, the piano itself. These are family history, and they stay with family. And the test Pressings the Christie's representative asked. The rare vinyl. Those can be auctioned, Aaliyah said. Collectors can buy them, but with one condition. They have to agree to make high-quality digital copies available to the public domain. No one gets to hoard these recordings. The music has been hidden long enough. Within a month, the donations were finalized. The Smithsonian received Duke Ellington's original black, brown, and beige arrangement. The Museum of African American History received the Billie Holiday materials. The Library of Congress received the John Coltrane tapes. The auction was held in November, 6 months after the discovery. It made international news. The rare test pressings sold for astronomical prices. A Charlie Parker recording went for $8.2 million. A Billie Holiday private session recording for $6.5 million. In total, the auction raised $47 million. All of it went to the foundation. Within a year, the first scholarships were awarded. 25 full-ride music scholarships to students who couldn't otherwise afford college. 10 grants to small archives working to preserve regional jazz history. 5 lawsuits filed against record labels on behalf of musicians' estates that had been cheated out of royalties. And in Brooklyn, in a small apartment that Aaliyah could now afford to buy outright, but chose to stay in anyway, a restored Steinway piano sat in the living room. Playable now, its action repaired, its strings replaced. But with a small plaque installed on the music stand, William Duke Morrison, 1925 to 2024, Guardian of Jazz History. This piano knows more than music. Aaliyah played it every day now. She played Duke Ellington. She played Thelonious Monk. She played her grandfather's compositions, the ones she'd found written in fading ink on staff paper tucked between the other documents. And sometimes when she played, she swore she could feel him there. Patient, proud, finally, at peace. The mockers didn't call anymore. Her Uncle Jerome had sent one text. "You were right." "I'm sorry." She'd responded with a simple thumbs up. Her cousin Marcus had shown up at her door one evening, sheepish and apologetic. "I was wrong about the piano," he'd said. "And I was wrong about you. Grandpa knew what he was doing when he trusted you with this." Aaliyah had let him in, made coffee, showed him the journal. They'd cried together, reading their grandfather's words, understanding for the first time the weight he'd carried. "He loved us," Marcus said finally. "He loved all of us. But he trusted you because he knew you'd understand. You were the one who loved music for what it is, not what it could get you." It was true. And it was why, when institutions offered to buy the piano itself, offers that ranged into the millions, Aaliyah always said no. The piano wasn't for sale. The piano was home. A year after the discovery, Aaliyah was invited to give a TED Talk. She almost said no. Public speaking terrified her, but Dr. Williams convinced her. "Your story matters," he'd said. "Not just what you found, but what you learned. People need to hear it." So she stood on the red circle, looking out at an audience of thousands, and told them about a broken piano and the man who'd hidden history inside it. "My grandfather taught me that true value isn't always visible," she said. "He taught me that what looks broken might be protecting something beautiful, that what seems worthless to others might be priceless if you take the time to look deeper." She talked about the pressure to choose things that looked valuable, about her family's mockery, about the temptation to give up, to just sell the piano for parts and take what little money she could get. "But I didn't," she said, "because something my grandfather said kept echoing in my mind. This piano knows more than music." I didn't understand it then, but I trusted him. I trusted that he wouldn't have said it if it didn't mean something. She talked about what she'd found. Not the dollar amounts, those were just numbers, but the voices, the proof of genius, the evidence of exploitation, and the documentation of resistance against it. "My grandfather sacrificed his own fame to protect the legacy of others," she said. He could have used those connections, those recordings, those original compositions to make himself known. He could have sold them, profited from them, but instead he kept them safe. He waited for a time when they could be shared properly, when the musicians could get the credit they deserved. Her voice strengthened. "That's integrity. That's real success. Not fame or fortune, but knowing you did the right thing even when no one was watching, even when no one would ever know." She looked directly at the camera. "We live in a world that judges value by appearances, by Instagram likes and bank account balances, and whether people recognize your name. But the most important work, the work that really matters, often happens in silence, in secret, unrecognized and unpraised. My grandfather died thinking he was a failure. He died believing the world had forgotten him. But he wasn't a failure. He was a hero. He was a man who understood that some things are worth more than personal glory." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Here's what I learned from a broken piano and $95 million in hidden treasure. Don't judge by appearances. Don't dismiss what seems worthless. Don't let other people's mockery stop you from following your instincts. And most importantly, don't measure success by what the world can see. Measure it by what you know you've done right." The talk went viral. Within a week, it had been viewed 10 million times. The comments section filled with stories from people who'd been mocked for their choices, who'd trusted their instincts against popular opinion, who'd chosen meaning over money. Aaliyah read them all amazed. Her grandfather's story, his quiet secret act of preservation, was inspiring people around the world to look deeper, to value what others dismissed, to choose integrity over approval. She thought he would have liked that. Quietly, without fanfare, he was still teaching, still making a difference. Back in Brooklyn, Aaliyah continued teaching piano to children, but now she also taught jazz history at NYU, a position created specifically for her by the music department. Her classes filled up within minutes of registration opening. Students wanted to hear her tell the story, wanted to understand the history that had been hidden, wanted to learn from someone who'd literally uncovered buried treasure. She played the Steinway every day. Sometimes her students would come to her apartment against university policy, but she did it anyway, and she'd show them the piano, tell them its story, let them touch the keys that her grandfather had made unplayable to protect something precious. "This is what matters," she'd tell them. Not whether you become famous, not whether people recognize your name, but whether you create something true, whether you protect what's valuable, whether you leave the world better than you found it. She kept her grandfather's journal on the piano's music stand. Sometimes between students, she'd read it again. His words grounded her, reminded her why she'd chosen to donate most of the collection rather than keep it, why she'd established the foundation, why she still lived simply despite the money she could have kept. Her grandfather had shown her what mattered. Not wealth, but purpose. Not recognition, but integrity. Not success as the world defined it, but success as it truly is, knowing you did the right thing, even when it cost you, even when no one knew. 2 years after finding the hidden compartment in her grandfather's piano, Aaliyah Morrison stood in the Smithsonian, attending the opening of a new permanent exhibition, Voices Preserved, the Duke Morrison Collection, and The Hidden History of Jazz. The exhibition was beautiful. Glass cases held the original letters, the photographs, the sheet music. Audio stations let visitors listen to the rare recordings, the Charlie Parker live session, the Billie Holiday private recordings, the experimental Miles Davis and John Coltrane collaborations. Interactive displays told the stories behind each item, explaining the context, the exploitation, the resistance, the preservation. And in the center of the main gallery stood a Steinway piano. Not her grandfather's that was still in her Brooklyn apartment, still played daily, but an identical model from the same era. A plaque explained its significance. This piano represents the instrument that William Duke Morrison transformed into a vault hiding inside it, one of the most significant jazz archives ever discovered. Morrison's ingenuity and integrity preserved these materials for future generations, ensuring that the voices of Black musicians, so often exploited and erased, would not be forgotten. Aaliyah stood in front of the piano, remembering the day she'd asked for it. The laughter, the mockery, her family's certainty that she was making a terrible mistake. A young girl, maybe 10 years old, approached the piano. She pressed a key gently. "Did this really have treasures inside it?" she asked Aaliyah. "Not this one," Aaliyah said, crouching down to the girl's level. "But one just like it did. My grandfather's piano. Why did he hide things in a piano? Because Aaliyah said he wanted to protect something important, and he knew that sometimes the best hiding place is somewhere no one thinks to look. Somewhere that seems ordinary. Somewhere that seems broken." The girl thought about this. So even broken things can be important. "Especially broken things," Aaliyah said softly. "Sometimes what looks broken is actually protecting something beautiful." The girl nodded solemnly and moved on to the next exhibit. Aaliyah watched her go, thinking about all the ways her life had changed since she'd made the foolish decision to keep a broken piano. She was wealthy now, yes. The portion of the collection she'd sold had made her more money than she'd ever imagined. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that her grandfather's legacy was secure, that the musicians he'd protected were finally getting credit, that students were learning the true history of jazz, unfiltered and uncontrolled, that the foundation was helping young musicians who might otherwise never get a chance. What mattered was that she'd trusted her instincts, that she'd looked deeper, that she'd chosen meaning over mockery. Her grandfather had been right all along. true value isn't always visible. Sometimes the most precious things are hidden inside what everyone else dismisses as worthless. She thought about all the people who'd laughed at her, who'd called her foolish for choosing a broken piano over jewelry and cash. She wondered if they understood now. If they'd learned what she'd learned, that what the world values and what's actually valuable are often two completely different things. She left the museum as the sun was setting, walked through Washington, D.C.'s streets toward Union Station, where she'd catch the train back to New York. Her phone buzzed. A text from one of her scholarship recipients, a 19-year-old trumpet player from Alabama, just got accepted to Berkeley. Full ride from the Morrison Foundation. Ms. Morrison, you changed my life. Thank you. Aaliyah smiled, tears in her eyes. This was what it was all about. Not the money, not the fame, not even the historical significance of what she'd found. It was about opening doors, creating opportunities, honoring her grandfather's mission to protect and uplift Black musicians. She got on the train, pulled out her laptop, and started writing. She was working on a book now, telling the full story of her grandfather's life, the musicians he'd protected, the system he'd resisted. It would be published next year, with all proceeds going to the foundation. On the train back to Brooklyn, watching the countryside blur past the window, Aaliyah thought about a question she'd been asked repeatedly in interviews. What would you say to your grandfather if you could talk to him one more time? Her answer was always the same. I'd tell him I understand now. I understand why the piano was so important. I understand what he sacrificed. And I'd tell him thank you. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for teaching me that true value isn't always visible. Thank you for showing me what really matters. But more than that, she'd tell him something else. Something she'd only recently realized. I'd tell him that he wasn't invisible. That he didn't fail. That his life mattered more than he ever knew. That by choosing to be a guardian instead of a star, by protecting others, instead of promoting himself by hiding treasure inside a broken piano, and trusting that someday someone would find it and understand, by doing all that he became exactly what he was meant to be. A hero, a teacher, a man who changed the world quietly, secretly, and permanently. The train pulled into Penn Station. Aaliyah gathered her things, stepped onto the platform, and headed home to Brooklyn. To the apartment she still loved, despite being able to afford better. To the Steinway piano that sat in her living room, restored and playable, holding no more secrets, but still holding everything that mattered: memory, legacy, and love. She'd play it tonight, she decided. She'd play Duke Ellington. She'd play Thelonious Monk. She'd play some of her grandfather's compositions, the ones that were finally being recorded and shared after decades of silence. And maybe while she played, she'd feel what she always felt when her fingers touched those keys: connection. Purpose. The knowledge that some stories, some truths, some treasures are worth protecting, even if it takes decades for them to be revealed. Even if it means the protector never gets to see the moment when the world finally understands what they preserved. Her grandfather had kept the music safe, and now through her his story was being heard. His mission continued. His legacy lived on. Not in fame, not in fortune, but in truth, in justice. In the voices of musicians finally credited, compensated, and celebrated. In scholarship recipients who'd never have had a chance without his sacrifice. In archives that would educate generations to come. In a broken piano that held $95 million and something far more valuable: proof that what matters most is what you do when no one's watching, what you protect when it costs you, what you preserve for a future you'll never see. That was his gift. That was his lesson. That was his legacy. And Aaliyah would spend the rest of her life making sure the world knew his name. William Duke Morrison. Not a sideman, not a has-been, not a failure, a guardian, a hero. A man who understood that true success isn't measured in applause or recognition, but in the quiet knowledge that you did the right thing, protected what mattered, and left the world better than you found it. Even if you had to hide it all inside a broken piano to do it.